Chelik Beis of the Hamshach B'Shoshek Gimel Ayin Beis Tov Reish Ayin Beis, and we're holding in the Maimah Eila Telas Noach, and we're about close to at least half the way through the Maimah. Presently holding on Omid Toshin Zion, which we completed the Shindad Mem and brought us to the Kitzur. And tonight is Oil Lakofet Zion Tammuz, Toshin Ayin Vov, and here we begin. I think we agreed that we would learn the Kitzur on that Perik, and that'll allow us to get back into the flow without making unnecessary chazorah, because everything necessary to be said is said in the Kitzur. So we were dealing with the fact that we find that the Yesod, or the power of SHIUR of Bina, compared to Chokhmah, is very different. Bina comes only as far as the Midas, but is not Meir, and the Midas together with it are not Meir in the Etzem Pula of Maisa B'Poyo, Hein B'Kiyum HaMitzvahs, Hein B'Hanogas HaOdam Kol Yom B'Inyonei Olam V'Chulu. The Indian for Midas are not Meir B'Teich Neitzach Hod Yesod, which are the Midas Shayim L'Poel Mamish. Only that we saw that if there was a Hiserus of Ava Yira Amitiyim, then it's possible to say that there's a special Chayas in the Kiyum B'Poyo, and that Chayas is due to the fact that the Midah was a Midah Teva of Amitiyas, and that's Meir, and gives a certain Chayas of Derech Hechreach, Ein Hechreach, Sheinin Ha'izbonenes, Hamidas should be Meir in the Etzem Maisa B'Poyo, and the Ike Maisa B'Poyo comes mitzad Heskem, the Inyonim Ademim Lazeh, which don't necessarily carry with them Giloi or the Midas B'Poyo. And then what the Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Dalet, that Ava Yira, they are the Shoresh, the Kol HaMitzvos Asei, the Kavanah that they are Shoresh, that if there's not the arousal of a midah, then there's going to be the Kiyum Amiti, the Mitzvos B'Klau. I will love Davkir that that's Meir B'Goloi in the actual Poel Mamish. And we learned in Shindad Mem, we learned that the term for that one, the Sibah, for that was due to the fact that Chokhmah Bina are interrelated in the form of Atzmas or Etzem V'Pashtas. That Bina outside of Yezatei, viele of the Inyan Izbonenes, al derech harotzei, ha'toiv, is only a Ispashtas of the Inyan HaMoichin. And Amitias Atzmias HaMoichin is the Inyan from Moichin de Abba, the Inyan from Chokhmah, and that being the fact that the Etzem HaSeichel HaMishchadik, Eitzel HaOdam, that's the Inyan from Chokhmah. And that's what he says now in the Kitzur. V'sivas HaDorahu, why is it the Bina is not Meir Ad Kadikach into the Inyan from Poel Mamish? The Sibas Adova Dina Atzmas Hamoichin Ubchinas HaChokhmah, the very essence of the Inyan HaMoichin, Davke Chokma Ubina Urachish Pashtus Amoichin. It's only a ha'ora and a radiation of the etzem ha'moichin. Sharei Nakudas Haskola Hu etzem ha'seichel or meir b'zeh ye etzem. We saw that the Indian of Nakudas Haskola, but that's the ratius, is galus of the seichel to the odom, and that's what we call the Indian of Haskola, but even Kloli. That's the etzem of that particular seichel. And we saw that there's a oyer which is meir in that, and that oyer is a oyer atzmi. And the inyan of the atzmias, it gives itself out in that oyer of the seichel, which comes into the inyan of the Baruch HaMavrik, or even Lamayla Mizeh in the inyan from Re'iyah afila. V'hasoge hirach havona sa'inyan. Chokma is the inyan from a ha'ora of etzem, and it's not just a ha'ora that is meir mamish der atzmi of the etzem. V'hasoge hurach havona sa'inyan. That's only that inyan comes into an inyan of sikhli b'derech havona. Ve'ein b'zeh etzem ha'oyer, and that's not the etzem of the oyer with the soga illuminates the life. I'm sorry, the askola b'derech ha'chokma illuminates the mensch and lights him up. Chokma's odom to'er pono. That's the inyan from oyer atzmi. V'pinim is metzad the etzem inyan mamish. Ve'ikar chokma hu re'iyas ha'etzem. And we went further to say that the Amasa inyan of Chokma mitzad amitius pnimius madrigoso is the inyan for Re'iyah, and that affects the whole koyach HaChokma, even in the lower madrigas, which we call the sikhli of Chokma, but that's the Baruch HaMavrik, the Nahi, is a chigama sikhli the Chokma, who is pastos lagabe. The amitius atzmius of Chokma is Re'iyah. So even the sikhli of Chokma, which is still shaykh to Chokma, but that's also only is pastos lagabe the Re'iyah atzmius, which is the pnimius ve'atzmius of Chokma. So we have even in Chokma itself a certain trace of is pastos, and that's the sikhli of Chokma. Agabi the amitius hariya, mikom ochim b'chokma, gamba sikli aika u'anocha. Even though that's true, but nonetheless, even that sikli, which is only espastas, it preserves within itself also certain tchuna atzmias, and that's where we see that even the sikli of chokma comes in the form of hanocha. What anocha is a deep conviction, what they say, the Lashon in Yiddish is like tzachok. The inyan very clearly, but hanocha, not in a even of having worked it out, darchi aseichel v'asikli, that's an appearance also in the form of a deep conviction that he's already got the etzem ha'inyan. Bina mekabelas rach yahasikli. When it's meir into bina, then the inyan of that hanocha, the derech re'iyah of uponim, the derech hispastas, that re'iyah is misalim altogether, and bina deals only with the sikhli. In other words, there's a certain trace of sikhli in chokma, that it comes and reveals itself with the hanocha. But once it goes into bina, it's purely the inyan of the sikhli. And that's limited. The whole inyan of his bonanas is entirely shaykh only to the pula bina, which is a soga. And even though we saw earlier in the os that there can be a certain return to the inyan of chokma, I feel inmitten these bondeness, and then there's a certain, what you might call, isgalus, beteicha is bondeness, the inyan chokma, but that's only letzerich, what you might call progress and broadening of his appreciation of the inyan. But the etzem inyan from Bina is not a inyan from re'io or appearance derech chokma. And therefore he said, Yesh b'zeh lifyomim gam b'chinas chokma de'ba'im chayz bonnenes mischatshi minyonim. Sometimes, in order to broaden and deepen his appreciation, then there's given to him chidushim, but derech hanocha also in the middle of these bonnes. Or he said, shelachabonas einin tzorich lechadish dover. In order to really appreciate what the inyan is all about, he doesn't yet have enough factors to make it clear 100%. And therefore he needs to be machadish a certain inyan. But those all inyanim which are just bashkocha pratiyas amnam, but they're not the immediate inyan of these bonanas. They're just like dvarim hayitzim and a klal l'chazek at inyan's bonanas. And they're like a ha'or of chokma be'emtze inyan ha'soge SHIUR ha'ikar in the inyan from Bina. Hamshocha is pashtas, the hamshocha that is pashtas, hu b'seidav hadroga, al-kain yesh agbola la'agiloi. And since we saw that the hamshocha of Bina, which is in etzem inyan is a inyan from his pashtas, and therefore it's given to what we saw seidav hadroga. But that implies the inyan from Helen, in the inyan from his where there can be certain inyanim of tzimtzum b'helen, kiyadua, in the inyan from his and because it's a pashtas, Bina, therefore there can be chal in its hamshocha further lamata, inyanim for tzimtzum b'helen, what they're seidav hadroga. The al-kain yesh hagbola la'hagiloi, hagbola meaning how far it can be mezgal, since it touches the inyan from tzimtzum, what we might call helim, inyanim of the staucheles, the seidav hadroga, it's not able to reach into inyanim shopol mamish. Mashenkein, the inyan from chokma is maya afila l'marochik. And that's what we said, that you saw that Abba is Davke Orech, the inyan from length, implying the inyan from Hamshocha further the Lamata, as he's going to say now. Alright, so now we begin. Chapter Shim Mem Hei V'Oitois. A further factor why it is that Bina doesn't reach Kokak L'Rochek is Shabina Ibch Mekabel Mir Chokma. Another very profound yesod in the difference between Bina and Chokma is that Bina is only a Mekabel from the minyan of Chokma. In other words, it's like a atzmi with a Mekabel mimeno. And moving that the Mekabel is totally legamri in the mashpia elav, and therefore he has a certain limitation in just how far he can go. Marochek, being as he is, just a makabel bilvad. He's not a atzmizdika, but he has like unlimited koiches. So he said, the chokma, for example, shehu atzmas aseichel, dahaina nakudas askola, but that's the etzem on nakuda, hari ein zeh, bechinas makabel. That's not being makabel from anywhere, shari zehu, aseichel shenes chadish etzloi. But that's the new seichel which has appeared to him. So enoch hanami, it comes from somewhere, but it doesn't come but derech mashpia omer kabel or derech harogya. Now it comes in even as we'll see the inyan from chokma, me ayin timotzei, it's a inyan from a gilui of a atzmias, from a madrega atzmias od yoter naila. And that's the inyan of what's nishchadsh etzloi, and that's the beginning of the whole information to a mensch, which is called chokhmah. And that's the etzem haseichel. Obina ukamoi kli ameivin es haseichel. In other words, kli indicates a makabel, and what the mashpia does, he literally feeds certain inyonim into the kli, and then the kli functions in a way that it brings what we call havana v'asog. That the kli is also altered the inim from a makabel, because the mashpia fills up the kli, and he gives the kli, and then it's able to carry out as much as what a makabel can. It's inyonim which are havana. Okay, moving miyamosho. If we take the version of the Gemara in Masechta Kesubos, miyamosho she'ein adema shmiya l'riyah. But we have the klal that ein adema shmiya l'riyah, and therefore Eid is not nasa dayon v'loshen Gemara, that somebody actually saw it happen. He can't be a judge on a bezdin, because the judges on the bezdin have to hear. They've got to hear misho what he has made, and therefore we say that the name of Duma Shmiya L'riyah. Somebody's already seen it, and by him Shmiya is already a double tofel. So therefore he said, Harei Ashomeya Hu Mikabel Mizrosei. It comes out that the whole inyan of a Shomeya is that he's received from the Tveita. Akamei Kain Inyan Shema Yisrael. I feel in Aveda from the Nishamas Yisrael. That's what they koyrik, it's a Shema. Well, that's a inyan Gadol in Aveda's Hashem, but nonetheless, it's called Shema, Kriya Shema, being as it is, based on the inyan and Shema Yisrael. He said, Shaz Bonanas, Eich Havaya Echad, Hu Adayin Etzleino B'china Shmiya. That means to say that when we hold in Vedas Atfilah by the inyan and Shema, then we're holding on a level on Shmiya. And it's Kemoy Sheshomeya Inyan Azeh Mezulosei V'lo Yishuhu Roya Be'ein of Mamish. Despite the Ribuy Inyonim, which are Mavua, V'chsidus, V'kolas Forim B'negeh to Shema Yisrael, nonetheless, when you say Shema Yisrael, you are like awakening your mind to what's called a Hizbonanas, Ki'ilu, that you're being Shomeya mi Mokem Acher, mi Azulat. But not that that's something which is Mishchadesh, but there are Re'iyah Atzmiyas Et Lecho. Well, and that's what he adds, V'lo Yishuhu Roya Be'ein of Mamish. Afilo Be'enei Aseichel. Weakness, it's in a form of his bonanas, b'taros shel, and therefore it expresses itself with the lashon Shema Yisrael. Ve'ein adema l're'iyah, and therefore the whole Aveda from Krishma can't be compared to the inyan from Re'iyah. What the Gemara tells us that Eis Chacham Harei Es Hanela. The Gemara Masechet Tomid says that Emes Chachma is somebody. A Chacham is somebody that is Ro'eh Es Hanela, and like the famous Biyuv is that he sees how in every nivra how it is being noilad. Yesh min orayin b'kol rega. He sees how every moment the koyach ha-machadesh b'chol yom tomid is mashpia and machadesh. The nivra kol rega v'rega mi'ayin layesh, and therefore he calls it a noilad. And he said another idiom very similar to that is the pasuk in Iyov, Umipsori Exa Elokar. It takes not from Bitsori Mamish, nor from the Prote Hayachas, but the Nefesh with the Guf. I'm able to understand the Inyonim how they are in Elokus Lamaila, the Inyonis Spirit V'churu. And however, the pasuk says Exa Elokai, I can see what, even though that's a mila of the Targum, it's not a direct lotion for Re'iyah. However, the Rebbe puts in brackets a Dova Nifla. Umufua b'machiacha shezeu b'chinas hakora mipsori echze means the infant hakora. What is well known that hakora is pnimis adas, pnimis hamoichin, where the mensch is ki'ilu roya. He sees it, and it's known to him in a way as if he'd seen it before. Ki'ilu roya b'chinas riyah chushias abo meinyone ha'olam kamei su'u morim einechem uru'u. So here's a chiddush that the Rebbe is saying that mipsori exa elakah can be compared to the hakora, which leads to riyah chushias abo meinyone ha'olam kamei su'u morim einechem. That's the pasuk in the Novi, which says you should elevate your eyes, mi bora ele. So once again, when you lift up your eyes to the heavens, you don't actually see the chayes elikus, or it's bora to you that you do. It's a form of re'iyah chushis, even though it's not mamish re'iyah chushis with the naked eye, kipshutei. And therefore he calls it an infant hakora, and they are equalized exa elakah, and that inyan of seeing through, observing dvarim agashmiyim nailim, kamoi rias dvarim agufim elyonim v'cholo sumorim. They say you come to a riyah, which is a riyah chushi, yes, more than it is just a soga. And therefore he calls it hakora. So Kunta is that Mipsori Exa is a very high madrega, correlative to the infant Riyah Gashmis Kipshute. However, it's not mamish that, but it's close to it. Kamoi Ato Horeso Ladas, like a Matan Torah, the Eberster was macharis to Ali Yidden, that Ato Horesa, you've been made literally to see, in a way that Ladas, it will become a Dova Yadia Panemias, but Dera Hakora. And what have you been given that? Ki Havaya Hu Elokim. Yeah, you've come to see. She is a Kilu Roya Beria Hoshiyas. And therefore the Russian Ato Horesa. Horesa Dafkia Inifan Re'iyah, and that means that Alidei Matan Torah, it was mishchadish by them Ma'inyan, that they could look at the world, and from the seeing of the world and all the Nivroim, that they could come to see literally Elikus and the Elikus of Maluvish boy. And that's a Inyan of Re'iyah, which was given, albeit no mila, or Reisaladas, upon him, all of those inyonim are bidimian, either to the traitor, and they are the inyan from Re'iyah de Chochma. That's the etzem direct experience of the Odom reacting directly to an observation of Elikus. Not a inyan from Avon of Asoga, but looking at the Olam HaNivra, the derech conviction ad kedikach of das that it's a nifariya, and therefore it's ki'ilu roya b'riya choshias mamish. Mashein kein shmiya. When he hears from a twaita, then bechinas bina, he bechinas mekabel. But that's only a inyan from a makabel, not that you see and that you observe and you react to Elokus with a very intimate and profound kesher, which is yours, which is the inyan from Riyah. No, you're just hearing the details derech mishu acher, or derech another party, to use the expression. דהיינו, שאין זה שהוא בעצמי יודע את הדבר, או כמו בראייה, יש שהוא רואה את הדבר. He's utterly involved in the matter. He sees it, and he doesn't need to be informed about it or given any detail. He sees the עצם הדבר לעצמי. כי אם, however, the inyan from Bina, and that's the point being made, that's רק ששומע ומקבל הדבר בשכלו. He's מקבל that דרך אמצעי אחר. Not that he lives it directly, בלי שום אמצעי, through his own powers of observation, which observation is different than a haskalah or a soga. The soga is only what you are informed, and you build up an impression, albeit a deep impression in yourself, but it's only what you've been given and informed. Yeah, v'kivan shayis bonana hu b'china hiva b'chinas makabel, al kain. Since it's a makabel, then it applies to that the cloud that ID detorid lamivla loipolit. Now that's a lesson which occurs becoming Mekaimas in Chassidus, but in the actual lesson of Shas, I'm not sure there's such an expression. It's written in the Gemara, Mida Bola Mivla, Miflat Loi Polit, Mashu Kazeh. But not the lesson I did the Torah Lamiva. But that language occurs, I think, in some of the great poskim. And it's based on the lesson of the Gemara in Perek Kolabosa in Chulin. That there the lesson is the Mivla Bola Polit Lo Miflat Lo Polit Mashu Kazeh. But the same basic principle, that something which is still in the moment, and it's still in the momentum of being Boleya, then it's at that moment, and the time when it's still being Boleya, it's not maflit, it doesn't give out any time. And only when we can be Mashaya, that the inyan in Isurim and in Saravi or Sainyonim has been already Boleya, and once it's already been Boleya, ad Shleimus, then it gives out a Plato. And that's therefore the Lashon in Gemara is a little bit different, but that's the implication. Yeah, Velochein, lo yumshog memeno ha'er v'ashev rak b'korev. Since he's so completely dependent, and so how are we touching it here? Not the inyan from Pliasis, over here we're touching that these bola, mivla bola, or Heidi the Tori, la mivla, he's hearing and being makabel from another party, dahainu from his mashpia, and therefore he can't really do anything, and he's not shy to any pu'ula chutz mim atzmo, because he's busy hearing and being makabel from the mashpia. That's how we're touching it now in Ruchni saying. And therefore, he said, since he's so busy the whole time being makabel from Mishu, and that Mishu is already albeit an elevated Mishu, but that's a mashpia, as lo yimshu meno ha'er v'ashev rak lekoreh. Therefore, lo polit means that he hasn't got in himself the koyak, and the power nafshi is to give things out in such a way that they will go a long way from him and from Inyonov into Inyonov Shel Chitenius or Ilam V'Apel Mamish. No, things sort of stay in and around the etzem pula of being makabel. But that's the inyan von ID, the lesson that the Rebbe uses, ID the Torah Lamivla. And so therefore, it's not nimzur, only bekorev. The inyan ID the Torah Lamivla, or the lesson of the Gemara, the Mivla Bola, Ainu she'inyan eino atzmi etzloi. It's not something that he's experienced. On the contrary, he wouldn't really sort of be in this inyan had he not heard it from somebody. And therefore he said, she'inyan eino atzmi etzlo. It's not that he saw it, malachatchila, ve'eino misatzim mamish etzloi, and therefore it doesn't become part of his etzem. Yevahu tomid b'chinas makabel, and therefore he needs the whole time to be a receiver, and he's busy. The Torah means the idea of preoccupied. He's preoccupied lamivla, v'al kein eina yochol ye'leilik b'zel ha'marachek, and therefore he can't, as it were, bring all this out into a distant place, because then he'll lose the kesher with the mashpia, and he won't be boilea keraui. He'll sort of become weakened in the whole inyan, and his whole strength of the bira of the inyan by him, and its clarity chulu is all dependent on the fact that he's boilea. He said, "Okamoi b'mashpia makabel is well known. The makabel is ashpoa." If he hasn't really become misatzim with it, hasn't really become part of him and his essence, the kasher misrachek mea mashpia misalem or mistalik memeno ashpa. He can become, as it were, weakened in the whole profundity of his connection and his koiches with that hashpah and those ideas that he was given, and it can even be mistalik, and he can even lose it and be not clear where he's really holding with it. Yeah, so he said it can be mistalik, mimeno hashpah, v'kasher hu misatzim memoi. But that's already a very special inyan in the inyan of Seichel Atzmai, Dahainu Bina, where he's only a makabel, but he said the shlemus is that he takes Bina in such a way that he makes it part of his very etzem, and he links up with it in a way that becomes real to him, v'atzmusei. Which means that even though he didn't see it and he didn't experience it, however, he's become misatzim with it in such a way that will be machazikim in such a way that he's able to be misrachek. In other words, that this is like within the inyan for Bina, the most ideal situation of the makabel from the mashpia is that he's mamish mitatzim with the inyan hashefa. He said, Raksha b'nimshal, Raksha b'moshel, yehu b'evan asoga. The kasha oid loi, yisi go inyan eitev, dainu she'yehu, masik is amiti as inyan, rak masik kibel mea mashpia arizeh misalam alideh. In other words, that what we said about being misatzim, that's like an ideology, an idealist state, which is not really part of the etzem marshal of the two inyonim of Ria and Shmiya of Chokmah Bina. But so-called Bina is the inyan where he's always totally unaware of the fact that he's totally in the mashpia, and therefore it's an inyan from Shmiya. But Shmiya means that you're still hearing from the Zulas. And what we mentioned about being misatzim with the inyan abina, that's like a perfection which is not really shak or kak to the moshel. So therefore he says, Oid loi isigo inyan haitev, dainu she'yehu mazik as a medias inyan. in the Moshel, and I'll be wrong, when I get to Bina al derech harogel, then we're dealing with the inyan that he hasn't reached such a level where he can be masik the emes amiti as a inyan. Because then when he yesh lema, what the Rebbe means with it is that when he's masik amiti as pnimi as a inyan, how it is in Bina, and he becomes really misatzim with it, then he's gone back to a certain extent to the inyan of Chokhmah. And it's no longer the immediate inyan of Bina al derech harogel, like it's mavur that the nekudas atamtzis, but the nekudas atamtzis is like the pnimius va'atzmias, the perfection of the koyach habina, or that's called the inyan from going back to the nekudas hachokhmah orapama. Therefore it's a nekuda, or even shel tamtzis, but that's returned as it were to the beetle, the immediate nekudas hachokhmah. So therefore that's not really shy so much to the two interrelated mashalim of Riyah and Shmiya, which are Chokhmah Bina al derech harogel. He said, Rak mashe kibo mea mashpira arizeh misalem alidei arichur. But that's the mashal we're dealing with. The derech pshitas that ain't a dema Shmiya l'Riyah is that the Bina al tzara anochein afila is however inyan from Shmiya bilvad, and therefore it's not able to be mitzrachik, and therefore it doesn't reach down into the koyach hamayis. And if it does be mitzrachik, then it causes a inyan shahilim, as we mentioned already. V'kasher mazik betur, da'inu shu mazik be'atzmei es amiti es ha'inyan, arizeh misatzim mimoi. And then that's the perfection. Like we said, the pnimis v'atzim is a bina which is returning to a certain extent to the inyan hachokhmah b'lavoch. Omnom, he said, k'mo yikein b'klolos inyan ha'soge liyosh ein zeh shu yodeh ba'atzmei adon. However, b'derech klal, in the klolos inyan of Riyah and Shmiya, and Chokhmah Bina, the inyan from hasoge is al derech harogel, she'ein zeh shehu yodeh ba'atzmei adon. Dahainu v'chinas Riyah, ki im rak shemasik es adon. And therefore, since it's got to do only with the inyan from hasoge, and it's not a inyan that he experienced directly in the form of Riyah, and therefore ef shaloi lisrachek mimkoyah. And therefore it can't go down, reach into the inyoni hamaisa, and the inyan of these bonanas is not able to be meya in the inyoni kipshute in maisa b'poyo. V'nim shel rabakiru ainu behamidas. It can only reach the inyan for midas, but albeit midas are not the inyan from moichin, and they're already a certain rikah from the inyan from moichin. But there, as to use the expression, they're the next step, and they're al pi kavana elyoina, that where there's been a correct hasoga, and that hasoga has led to a pe'ula arucha yoter, called his bonanas, then we reach midah, then we step down in the gilui koichas of the nefesh, and we have the inyan for midah. But then as misoyra, the inyan for na'ava v'yira, alidei bonanas. Avo v'chinas nahi. But to go a further step down, which is already inyan distant from the inyan amidas, that is not able to do. Avo, he said, v'chinas nahi. Shehu ashpoyas amidas, v'chinas hamaisa shalehem. And when it's going to go down that far, then Mr. Lechas is bonanas. Not that it goes away altogether and just becomes lost completely, but it's mistalek from the itzam pu'ula, which is under discussion, dahaina the inyan nehi v'poyo, the itzam expression ba'ilam of what the middle was all about. He said then his bonanas is mistalek V'nika rak reisham. In other words, not that it completely disappears, but it's makiv, as well known the expression in other places, bilvad on the Indian for nehi, and therefore it's only a reisham. There's actually poyo in the Maisa B'Poyo. He said, Ma'shein Chein HaChokmah. That's all going to get to Bina, which is only a Makabel. And the Indian from the Mirla Bola, Loi Polit, for the ganze Moshel, well, that's the Indian from Bina. And therefore, Bina, being as it is, better, Makabel, is not able to reach into the Indian from Nehi, B'Poyo. And in the Indian now it is when I get to Beklau, the Anhogan, the Snagas, Sheba Elam, V'chulu. However, he said, if we're talking about Ein Adema Re'iyah L'Shmiya, then it's another story. He said, the Indian from Chochmah, She'i B'chinas Re'iyas Ein HaSeichel, Shezehu Atmi, that's his own direct contact, his own direct experience of the Inyan, but der Re'iyah Hu Atzmei, then it's a Inyan Atzmi, Loirach, his pashtas. It's not just a ha'ora and a radiation, Hu Etzlo Inyan Atzmi, Yeshahu Aroya, he's the one who sees. It's him himself, Etzamat Museh. Harizeh Makia, then that can have an effect. Afila at the Inyan van Maisa and Inyonim Ashayachim la Maisa and Keitzad Lifel Inyan Maisa B'cholo. He said, Magia Gam B'chinas Nahi. Why? The Yesod Abba is Davke Oro. In other words, the Yesod Aim is Kotzer. Or only Magia Adamidas. Ashen, the Yesod indicates the Indian from Ashpur. The Yesod of Abba is the Indian from Chochmah, but that's Davke Oro, meaning that it reaches into all the Madrigas. Afilo, those what look to be describable as distant. He said, U'kumoy b'chol drochecho do'ehu. He said, the Indian from Kol drochecha do'ehu, even the Lashon is do'ehu or da'ihu, is indicative of das and even is kashrus. But derech Inyan das, he said, the amidis nasinas koyach hatem, the Inyan from Chochmah. And Davki Biglau, the Inyan from Re'iyah, the Chochmah, but that gives him the ability to behold Rachacha. I feel in Yonah, which come down into Anhoga Yom-Yomius in the world, it all comes in a even that he's Makusha, what that's the Inyan from Da'ehu. So here we're talking about the Mila of Da'ehu, not necessarily the Etzem Koyach Hadas, even though there's a certain kesher between Penimis HaChochmah V'das, אבל אין כאן המוחים ברגע זה, להריג בזה. So he said, that's the Inyan, יש גם בכל דרוכו, בקיום המצוות בפויו, but not only that, וגם he said, בהילו דרכי העולם, in just going around in the world and doing things in life, בפויו, in the world. Then he says, he will be in a state of discussions of being bound over. Wow. So the Rebbe said he'll be so bound up with the Koyach HaChochmah that he won't be Masir Daite, Afila Karega, Afila for a moment. He's so makusha, mitzad the bitl at the Inyan van Chochmah. So he said, Zehu mechinas ha-Chochmah davke. He said, the kasher hayadiyah yibechinas his amtes. Yeah, how he could, he has seen it in his own emet, and he's observed it with his own koyach hamiti. How he said, bilti mistalig. It's not something that's going to leave him. Ubilti nifsach le'olam. Yeah, it's like the old saying, I saw it with my eyes, even I can't forget. Yeah, there's something that he's not going to be necklash, or it's not going to leave him forever. It's going to always be nidbach. It's lo b'naneva atzmi. She'inin etzloi tomid b'lei hefsek. He said, "V'kol shchein b'pinas riyah mamish," and how much more? Here we're talking about riyah chushiyas, riyah b'derech haseichel. Mipsori echzer ato horeisa ladas. That's not a even riyah chushiyas mamish. But he said if they could be, how much more so, if they could be riyah mamish, that will be mischadish liyosid. And maybe there are certain individuals that are zeicha also to a certain aspect of riyah, feel of bisman tzeh. So he says that how much more so in the universe riyah mamish, v'lochein achokma yivachinas bitl. Oh. And so he said the Indian from Beetle is how do you call it, a far-reaching and what you might call non-preventative, doesn't give in to manias bekurim. How do you say it? Beetle just keeps going no matter where you are, and it just carries you through. And he said, therefore, it's an Indian from Beetle, v'lo b'chinas ahavo. That's a very profound remark. That the Inyan Midas that come from Hasoga is Pashta Samoichin, they are Ahava. And Ahava is a grace of Zach. And Ahava is a form of Tebekas, V'chulu. He said, of a beetle is something different. When you got Ahava, you're totally into your Seiras and into the Slavas. He said, when you're bottled, you're just going to do what you have to do wherever you are and whatever's going on. So he says, "Liyos, shezev v'chinas re'iyah, yeah, alkein v'chinas bittul." Since this is based on something that you yourself have experienced, even Yoshia, and you were involved in it, mamish b'terech direct, not terech mishu acher or eze inyan acher, but that's mamish davki you yourself have this. And therefore that causes a new Inyan from Beetle, and that's Lamaila, even then the Inyan from Hava. Bezehu Magia Beko Mokem, Gam Behinas Amaisa. V'ainu Shabeetle, V'gam Agilui, Magia Gam Behinas Amaisa. Inyan Agilui, V'eragis Dr. Hashem. So I have a feeling that unfortunately I have a very serious problem with my throat. I'll have to, you'll have to forgive me, but I'll have to pause here for this evening. And I hope I'll be able to work at it and overcome it. The heat seems to be affecting me in a very strange way. I seem just not to be able to talk properly. But anyway, Be'ez Hashem, what the Rebbe is now saying in the next few lines, I feel that we should make a start in the coming class around about here, based on what we've said. Ad Lekan, we'll then be able to develop on it and talk about it in a more take-a way. Be'ez Hashem. So, the ikka is that everything should be with gewaltig Hatzlacha. And the last few days have been huh? I can see a small picture quite about, but I can't see many people there. I hope there was a few people